Alice in Wonderland. There are days that begin in ordinary ways, with clouds drifting, tea cooling, and clocks ticking exactly on time. But this was not one of those days. This day began with a whisper. Not from a voice, but from the grass itself, and the breeze that tugged at lace sleeves, and the dragonfly that paused mid-air as though listening for something curious. She sat beneath a hawthorn tree in her family's garden, sprawled across the blanket her sister had laid down for their quiet reading hour. A thick history book sat open on her sister's lap, its lines stiff with monarchs and dates that had long turned to dust. Alice had tried to listen, truly she had, but her eyes kept drifting to the sky, to the clouds that looked like marching teapots and sleepy lions. She plucked at the grass, bored out of her mind. "How can anyone care what year Lord would ever declared a treaty?" she mumbled. "It's all just ink. What about the stories between the lines?" Her sister, ever patient and proper, didn't respond. She simply turned a page with the quiet elegance of someone too grown up for nonsense. But Alice was not too grown up. She was just the right amount of curious. That's when she saw it. A rabbit. At first glance, nothing strange. A white rabbit with pink ears and eyes like polished garnets. But then, he paused, tugged a golden pocket watch from a small vest, and said, quite clearly, "Oh dear. Oh dear. I shall be too late." Alice sat upright. "Did you?" She turned to her sister, but the other girl was still reading, oblivious. The rabbit scurried through a patch of lilies, muttering about time and schedules. His ears twitched like antennae tuned to some invisible clock. He adjusted his waistcoat and slipped behind a rose bush. Alice stood, heart thudding with excitement. "Wait," she called, brushing dirt from her skirt. "Mr. Rabbit, sir. You dropped nothing, but I simply must follow you." She ducked beneath low branches, scratched her knees on thorns, and followed the white blur of fur until she reached the edge of a clearing she'd never noticed before. At the center of the clearing was a tree, a massive, knotted thing with a hollow beneath its roots, just large enough for a child to crawl into. The rabbit looked over his shoulder once, then vanished inside. Alice dropped to her hands and knees. She hesitated, but only for a second. And then she crawled in. The world shifted the moment she entered. It felt like the ground was pulling away from her, as if she'd stepped into a breeze made of dreams. There was no floor beneath her hands. Only a sensation of floating. And then she fell. Not with panic, but with wonder. It wasn't dark. The tunnel glowed softly, and as she fell, she spun past floating objects, shelves of books, teacups that poured themselves midair, top hats drifting like jellyfish, chandeliers with candles that blinked like eyes. Mirrors passed her, and she glimpsed not her own reflection, but dozens of strange versions of herself, one with cat ears, another dressed as a queen, another balancing on a spoon. She laughed. "This must be a dream. But it's my favorite kind." Time didn't seem to move in a straight line. She passed the same hat 3 times, or maybe it was a different one. The fall was slow and fast at once, like diving through a storybook where the pages turned themselves. And just when she thought she might drift forever. Thump. She landed gently, as if dropped by a sigh, onto a pile of cushions in a small round room. Walls lined with clocks and ticking things spun all around her. One clock was shaped like a fish. Another had no hands at all. Alice sat up, dazed but grinning. She looked around. A small wooden door stood in one wall, far too tiny for her to fit through. A curtain fluttered near the other wall, and behind it, another door, this one slightly larger. She stepped toward it. Somewhere in the distance, she could still hear it. Tick, tick, tick. Or was it? Tock, tock, tock. She dusted off her skirt and said aloud, to no one in particular, "Well, I do hope someone's making tea." And with that, she stepped forward, into the first riddle of Wonderland. Alice stood in a room that seemed to breathe. The walls were round, made not of brick or wood, but something stranger, like old parchment painted with soft ink, curling at the edges as if they'd been forgotten by time. The only light came from glowing mushrooms blooming near the baseboards and floating lamps shaped like sleeping mice. The air smelled faintly of lavender and lemon tea. And doors. So many doors. The room stretched and shifted as she walked, as though deciding what it wanted to be. Along its curved wall stood a row of doors, each one completely different from the others. Some were tall and thin, some round and squat. One door was made entirely of glass marbles, another had teeth. One shimmered like moonlight on water, and another whispered in a language Alice didn't recognize. She blinked at them all. "Curious," she said, placing her hand on one. It immediately hissed and flinched away. "Oh. Rude." She turned to leave, only to discover there was no sign of the hole she'd fallen through. No cushions. No ceiling, either. Just this room and its hundreds of impossible doors. Alice crossed her arms. "Well, I suppose you'll want me to choose one." Suddenly, a cough. She spun around, and saw a small table where there had not been a table before. Upon it sat a tiny brass key, a bottle labeled, "Drink me," with polite cursive script, and a plate of 3 sugar cookies, arranged like a clock. One said, "Eat me in frosting." Alice eyed the items suspiciously. "Is it poison? Is it a trick?" she muttered. "Well, if I were writing this story, I certainly wouldn't poison the heroine in the second chapter." She picked up the bottle, sniffed it. It smelled of wild cherries and mint. With one cautious sip, warmth surged through her, followed by a tingling in her toes. Then, shrink. Down she went. Her dress bunched around her like a circus tent, and the room grew into a palace of giants. The table now towered above her. "Oh dear," she muttered, stumbling as her now tiny shoes slipped beneath her. "I do hope I can still reach the key." But the key was already gone. Instead, a door had appeared, a tiny one tucked between the baseboards like a mouse's front gate. It glowed faintly blue. Alice took a deep breath, brushed off the crumbs from her skirt, and marched forward. The tiny door opened soundlessly as she approached. On the other side was not a hallway, not a staircase, not even a sensible path, but a garden made of swirling smoke and petals, where flowers had eyes and vines whispered secrets in riddles. The path ahead wound into a forest where the trees bent backward, and the sky hung upside down, stars twinkling beneath her feet like a river of constellations. And there, standing in the middle of it all, was the White Rabbit. Checking his watch. tapping his foot. Oh no, he said. She's done it again. Late, I say. The Queen will be dreadfully cross. He turned and saw her. Ah. There you are. Took you long enough. Honestly, girls who shrink ought to learn to hurry. He vanished in a puff of daisies before she could reply. Alice stared after him. Well, that wasn't very helpful at all. Still, she took a step forward into the garden, and the door clicked shut behind her, fading into the trees. Now there was no going back. Only forward, through Wonderland, through riddles and riddles and riddles still to come. It shimmered, not with heat, but with possibility. Each breath she took smelled different, sometimes like honey, sometimes like rain. Trees bloomed in impossible colors, lavender oranges, peppermint red leaves, and stems that twisted into musical notes. The sky, now pale green, rippled above like pond water disturbed by thoughts. A stone path curved gently between tall hedges. But the hedges murmured, like they were gossiping behind leafy hands. She hesitated. Then came a whisper, soft and teasing. Another girl, come to pick us, has she? No, she's too small. Too much curiosity, not enough roots. She's lost, that one. Look at her shoes. Alice spun. Who said that? A chorus of giggles rustled through the blooms. And then, one by one, the flowers lifted their heads. Yes. Lifted. Their heads. The tulips yawned and blinked sleepily. The daisies tilted their petals like hats. A large sunflower twisted around and regarded Alice with something close to disapproval. You're not a rose, it said, voice deep and scratchy. Well, no, said Alice, rather startled. I'm a girl. Obviously, said a violet with a sniff. She's not blooming properly, though. Far too much walking. No petals. Not even thorns. Alice stepped back, eyeing the garden with new caution. I didn't mean to offend anyone. I was following a rabbit. The flowers gasped. The white rabbit, crooned a lily, fluttering. Oh, dear. Then you better hurry. If the Queen finds you in her garden. Off with her head, shouted a daffodil gleefully. Hush, snapped the sunflower. We don't say that around children. Alice frowned. Who is this Queen everyone keeps mentioning? But the flowers were suddenly silent. Their leaves stiffened, and their blossoms drooped. The garden dimmed. A breeze passed through like a warning. The sunflower finally spoke again, quieter now. She's the Queen of Hearts. Her garden touches everything. Even us. But she only lets in roses, added a lily. Red ones. Not wild little things like you. Alice lifted her chin. Well, wild things make the best stories. Some flowers giggled. Others sked. The sunflower studied her for a long moment, then nodded toward a hedge gate nearby. It had appeared silently, made of ivy and glass, half hidden under a curtain of wisteria. If you're determined, said the flower, go that way. But remember, in Wonderland, everything has a cost. Especially time, added a forget-me-not, almost sadly. Alice thanked them, curtsied out of habit, and stepped toward the gate. The vines parted like curtains, and the path ahead twisted like a question mark, leading into a forest where the trees grinned. The gate whispered shut behind her with a sigh, like the end of a sentence. Alice stood at the edge of a shadowy wood. The trees here were unlike any she'd seen. Their bark was striped like candy canes, their leaves shimmered like silk, and their branches curled inwards as if whispering secrets to themselves. Some trees leaned suspiciously closer when she passed, while others swayed, though there was no wind. The deeper she went, the stranger the world became. Mushrooms as tall as her head glowed faintly purple. Lanterns made from teapots hung from branches, bobbing slightly as though watching her. At times, the trees grew so close together that they formed archways, and other times, the path vanished entirely and reappeared several steps to the side. Still, she walked on, heart thumping with excitement and nerves. Then, laughter. Not from a person. Not from a place. From everywhere. It was soft at first, like velvet unraveling. Then louder, curling and uncurling around her like a ribbon of mischief. Alice spun. Who's there? A pair of eyes blinked open in the air. Then a wide, crescent-shaped grin stretched across invisible lips. The rest of the creature appeared slowly, one stripe at a time, until a grinning cat floated before her, stretched across a crooked branch that hadn't been there a moment ago. "Hullo," said the Cheshire Cat. Alice gaped. "You're floating." "I am," said the cat, nodding proudly. "Gravity takes one look at Wonderland and faints." Its body twisted and shimmered, tail curling like smoke. It blinked lazily with eyes the color of dusk. "You're not quite lost," it mused, "but not quite found either." Delicious. Alice folded her arms. "Do you always appear like that? Without warning?" "Only when I'm trying to impress someone." He rolled midair like a lazy spiral. "You're new. New things smell like questions." Alice tried to hold her ground. "I'm trying to find the white rabbit. He ran into this forest and—" The cat's grin grew wider. "Oh yes, the rabbit. Always in a hurry. Never looks behind him. Very bad at chess." "Do you know where he went?" "I might," said the cat. "But in Wonderland, knowing isn't quite the same as telling. And telling always costs something." "Like what?" The cat spun upside down. "A riddle. Or a secret. Or a truth you haven't told yourself yet." Alice thought for a moment. "What if I give you a riddle?" The cat purred. "Delicious idea. Proceed." She cleared her throat. "What's invisible, weightless, and breaks if you say its name?" The cat blinked. Then clapped his paws midair. Silence. "Oh, brilliant." He chuckled. "Very well. For that, you get a hint." He floated downward until his nose was almost touching hers. "Beware the tea party. Follow the hats. And don't drink the jam. It bites back." Alice opened her mouth to ask what that meant, but the cat was already fading, stripe by stripe. "Wait," she called. Only his grin remained. Then that, too, vanished. And far ahead, down the winding path of glowing leaves, Alice saw something strange, a tall, crooked table set with dozens of teacups, each one steaming and twitching. She stepped toward it. Whatever lay ahead, it was certainly not ordinary. The forest suddenly opened up like a yawn. Alice stepped into a clearing bathed in buttery light, filtered through clouds shaped like spoons and forks. In the middle stood a long, crooked table, so long it bent slightly in the center like it couldn't bear its own madness. The table was cluttered with teapots stacked like towers, mismatched teacups, spoons stuck in cakes, and clocks soaked in raspberry jam. Several chairs, none matching, were gathered around the table. Some stood on one leg, some hovered, and one was fast asleep. At the head of the table sat a man in a tall, dented top hat. His jacket was velvet, covered in crumbs. One eye twitched. He looked halfway between genius and disaster. Next to him sat a creature that looked part man, part hare, with twitching ears and a mug of tea he clearly wasn't drinking. A dormouse slept in a teapot beside them, snoring gently. Alice approached cautiously. "Excuse me." "No room," shouted the Hatter and the March Hare together. "But there's plenty of room," said Alice, frowning. "That's what the last one said," muttered the Hare. Then she took the mustard and never came back. Alice sat anyway. A teacup scooted toward her on its own. The tea inside rippled, changed color twice, then sighed and settled on violet. "Welcome," said the Hatter, staring at her as if she were made of puzzle pieces. "What's your name? Or should I guess?" "Alice." "Wrong," he said instantly. "You're someone much more interesting than that." The March Hare leaned in. "A secret agent?" "A poet with a sword," the Hatter gasped. "A collector of teacup souls," the Hare whispered. "No." Alice laughed. "Just a girl." The Hatter narrowed his eyes. "Girls are never just anything. They're the most dangerous kind of magic. Tell me, Alice, just Alice, what brings you here?" "I'm following the White Rabbit. He's late. For something." The March Hare huffed. "We're always late. Time hates us." The Hatter nodded solemnly. "That's why we divorced him." Alice blinked. "You divorced Time?" "Terrible relationship," said the Hare. "Always ticking. Never listening." The Hatter leaned in, very close. "Do you want to know a secret?" Alice nodded. He pointed to the middle of the table. A cracked pocket watch sat in a puddle of melted butter. "It's always tea time here." Alice glanced around. No shadows moved. No light changed. "Always?" "Always," said the Dormouse sleepily. "We argued with time, and now we're stuck in a loop. It's forever now. Delightful and dreadful." The Hare poured jam into a boot. "We make do." Alice sat back, watching the strangeness unfold. The Hatter argued with a spoon. The Hare made the tea cry. The Dormouse recited poetry from inside a bread loaf. It was nonsense, but enchanting nonsense. Then suddenly, the Hatter's eyes snapped toward her. "You're not staying," he said softly. "No," Alice replied. "I have to find the rabbit. He's leading me somewhere." The Hatter nodded slowly. "Then be careful. The queen's gardens grow wild these days. He leaned closer and placed something in her hand, a card. The Ace of Hearts. She's watching, he said. Even now. Then the wind picked up. And the table, the guests, the teapots, all faded like a dream too fragile to hold. Alice was alone again. But in her hand, the card still pulsed warm. And up ahead, the trees began to twist into hedge walls, tall, dark, and humming with danger. The path narrowed beneath Alice's feet. The whispering trees behind her faded, replaced by tall, towering hedges that stretched high into the misty sky. Their leaves were sharp-edged and humming, yes, humming, with a strange low sound, like bees trapped inside a drum. The entrance was an arch of twisted vines shaped like a heart, and carved into a wooden sign just outside it were the words, "Enter and lose your way, or yourself." Alice hesitated. But her fingers still curled around the Ace of Hearts card the Mad Hatter had given her. It pulsed faintly with warmth, as though it was alive, and when she held it near the hedge wall, the vines recoiled just enough to let her through. The hedge maze was nothing like an ordinary garden. The walls moved behind her when she wasn't looking. Doors appeared and vanished. Some corners had staircases that led to nowhere. Statues of red-card soldiers with painted grins stood frozen at intersections, eyes tracking her as she passed. And yet, there was a rhythm to it. A pattern. Alice soon realized that if she stepped only where the grass sparkled faintly with dew, the maze would shift in her favor. When she tried to cut across, the vines grew thorny and wild, blocking her path with laughter. After what felt like hours or no time at all, time had never truly returned, she came to a clearing at the very heart of the maze. And there, sitting on a throne of roses, was the Queen of Hearts. She was regal. Intimidating. Her gown shimmered with woven petals and ink-black thorns. Her crown was crooked, made of bent playing cards and gold thread. Her eyes gleamed like rubies, beautiful and terrifying all at once. Beside her stood a nervous king, tiny and round, like a jam tart in a suit. Card guards surrounded them, each one with a painted smile and trembling hands. "A girl," the queen said, rising slowly. Her voice cracked through the air like a whip. "In my maze. How interesting." Alice stepped forward, heart pounding. "I didn't mean to intrude. I was only trying to." "Trying," the queen echoed, smirking. "Trying is for chess pieces and rabbits." She descended the throne, circling Alice like a cat. "You've been to the forest. The tea table. The garden of flowers." Alice held up the Ace of Hearts. "The Hatter said you were watching." The queen smiled. Not kindly. "Oh, I've done more than that." She clapped once, and the vines parted behind Alice, revealing a wall of mirrors. In each one, a reflection of Alice, but different. One version wore a crown. One held a sword. One had rabbit ears. One had no eyes. "These are the pieces of you," the queen whispered. "In Wonderland, you're never just one thing. Every choice splits you further." Alice stared, trembling. "I don't want to be split. I just want to find the rabbit." The queen laughed. "The rabbit?" She waved her hand, and suddenly, he was there. The white rabbit. Trapped in a bell jar, frozen mid-sprint, blinking helplessly. "He ran into my maze without permission," the Queen said. "And in Wonderland, even time must ask to pass." Alice stepped forward. "Let him go." "Why should I?" the Queen snapped. Alice met her gaze. "Because this isn't just your Wonderland anymore." The card in Alice's hand suddenly glowed, bright red. The Queen stepped back. "Impossible." "No," said Alice, holding up the card. "It's my choice now." A wind rose. The maze shuddered. The mirrors shattered, each reflection fading like smoke. And the Queen of Hearts screamed, not in fear, but in frustration, as her maze began to unmake itself around her. The maze trembled under Alice's feet. The vines unraveled like frightened snakes. The statues crumbled to dust. Even the guards, those strange, painted cards, dropped their spears and fled into the swirling leaves. Only the Queen remained, still standing, but her throne had wilted. The roses blackened and fell away. "You don't belong here," she hissed. Alice didn't flinch. "Maybe not. But I chose to be here. And in Wonderland, choices shape everything." The ace of hearts in her hand burned like a miniature sun. She raised it higher, and the bell jar around the white rabbit shattered. He tumbled out with a yelp, landing on his paws with wide eyes and twitching whiskers. "Oh. I'm free," he blinked. "Marvelous. Absolutely behind schedule, but marvelous." The Queen of Hearts lunged forward. But a gust of golden light flared from Alice's card, forcing her back. The light grew brighter, surrounding Alice and the rabbit. The maze howled as it began folding in on itself, unraveling like the end of a story written backwards. And suddenly, Alice stood in a quiet field, the sky soft and gray-blue. The flowers didn't speak. The grass didn't shift. Just calm. And the white rabbit beside her, dusting off his waistcoat. "Well," he said, "that was all rather dramatic." Alice looked at him. "Where are we?" "The edge," said the rabbit. "Of Wonderland. Of the dream. Of you." She turned in a slow circle. In the distance, she could see outlines of all the places she'd been. The garden of talking flowers blooming in a breeze that smelled like memories. The floating grin of the Cheshire Cat flickering in a tree like a fading star. The sound of tea being poured at a table that wasn't really there anymore. "Was any of it real?" she whispered. The rabbit looked at her kindly. "In Wonderland, real is such a boring word." Alice smiled. And then, just ahead, she saw it. A mirror. Tall, glistening like morning glass, rippling like water. Her own reflection blinked back. She looked different somehow, braver. Wilder. Not someone who had stumbled through Wonderland, but someone who had walked it with eyes open. The rabbit gave her a polite bow. "Back you go, Miss Alice. The real world's waiting." She looked at him one last time. "Will I come back?" "Only if you forget how not to." Alice laughed. "That sounds like Wonderland." And she stepped through the mirror. Alice woke beneath a tree. The grass was cool. The wind was soft. Birds chirped in ordinary, nonsensical ways. She sat up. No sign of a maze. No white rabbit. No queen. But in her pocket, a single playing card. The ace of hearts, still warm. She smiled to herself. No one would believe her. But that was all right. She didn't need them to. Because somewhere, on the other side of dreams and choices and jam that bites back, Wonderland was still out there. Waiting.